Tonight on Reporting Scotland, the SNP set out a new economic blueprint for independence, including plans to keep the pound for at least 10 years. We'll have political reaction and hear what voters think in an area where the result was finely balanced in 2014. Police hunt the driver of a stolen car after a crash that left a motorist dead and a family, including a 5-year-old girl, in hospital.
This is a horrendous collision. Two families, a massive impact on two families, and not to mention the traumatic effect on all the witnesses and people that were involved in the accident. Also in the programme, we hit the beach as Scotland prepares for that rarest of things, a sunny bank holiday weekend. Good evening. The SNP's published a new blueprint for independence. The report from the party's Growth Commission spotlights a drive to attract more migrants to Scotland and promises to keep the pound for at least 10 years after independence. Nicola Sturgeon says the plan would help Scotland to thrive, matching the economic performance of other small countries. Her rivals say it's a recipe for spending cuts and should be dumped. This from our political editor, Brian Taylor.
The task: to fill gaps in the independence offer on economic growth, on public spending and, crucially, on the currency.
Andrew, how are you doing? This morning?
The man charged with that task, former Nationalist MSP Andrew Wilson. He argues that an independent Scotland would be nimble enough to match the economic dynamism of other small countries.
We've got all that it takes. The question is, have we got ambition for ourselves? Do we have a plan? Do we have a strategy? Have we been honest about the challenges? And I think the report tries to do all of those things. It's not the last word, Brian. Other people will have other ideas. I'm sure that people will disagree on some of the aspects of it, but we think it's an honest, workable, deliverable solution, and it's really ambitious, but we can do it.
On the currency, the report says keep the pound for at least 10 years and only consider a Scottish currency if and when the economy improves. The report argues for competitive business taxes, but not the previous plan for a 3% cut in corporation tax. It urges a new focus on export growth, and it says the big driver for the economy would be population growth. That involves financial incentives to bring students and graduates here from other countries, arguing their skills boost the economy. The aim: to push the population above 6 million. 4 years ago, referendum defeat left Nicola Sturgeon pondering. Since then, much has changed. North Sea oil revenues are below the forecasts used by the SNP, although today's report says Scotland remains energy rich and could divert cash to a fund for future generations. Above all, Brexit awaits. A real challenge, but, says the First Minister, also an opportunity to change direction.
Change is inevitable given Brexit. There is no status quo anymore. This is a debate about how we maximise Scotland's potential rather than just getting stuck in the despairing Brexit path that we know will make all of us poorer.
But Ruth Davidson says, why pile uncertainty upon uncertainty? She says people don't want to revisit independence.
Rather than the grandstanding we've had today from the First Minister, I think the people of Scotland just want her to go back to the day job of improving school standards and fixing our hospitals. But, this doesn't answer any of the questions that were raised even 4 years ago.
Today's report says Scotland would make an annual solidarity payment of around £5 billion to the rest of the UK to cover commitments on debt and international aid. It envisages a cut in defence spending as inherited plans come under review, and it wants to trim Scotland's deficit below 3% of economic output. Labour say that could mean tough times for Scotland.
It's billed as a Growth Commission report, but actually the prospectus it offers is a Cuts Commission report, and it's one which sees a fairly bleak future in that it is talking in depth about substantial cuts to public expenditure.
Nicola Sturgeon enthusiastically joins in, welcoming the big noise to Holyrood, young musicians from deprived areas of Scotland. Looking on, the author of today's report. Both say an independent Scotland would boost wealth and spread it around more fairly. Rivals, as ever, dissent.
Well, as Brian was saying, the Sustainable Growth Commission recommends that an independent Scotland keeps the pound for at least 10 years before a possible switch to a separate Scottish currency. But they've dropped the idea of a formal currency union with the rest of the UK. Our political correspondent Glenn Campbell has taken the currency question to Inverclyde.
No matter where you shop or what you buy,
How much is it?
£1.80, please.
£1.80. Here we are.
you need cold, hard currency to pay. But what currency would folk here in Inverclyde want Scotland to choose if there was a yes vote in a future independence referendum?
I think euros, just to be in line with other countries, you know, and for the economies and for travelling about in different countries and things like that.
I think it's an unnecessary complication to think of another currency, all the repricing, the cost of, you know, producing new currency or whatever. So.
And you'd stick to the pound as well?
I think so, yeah, if we could. If the Bank of England lets us.
Poonam Gupta's paper business trades around the world in all major currencies, but at home she'd prefer to stick with sterling.
I would basically say that if we actually go independent, then we need to look at a currency union if we want to stay with the pound. So we actually have some say in the financial policies for the United Kingdom.
But what if the UK says, no, we don't want to share?
Well, guys, don't say no. If you're going to go independent, just remember we've been with you for 300 years. We deserve some love from that point of view.
But in the 2014 vote, the UK government spurned the Scottish government's proposal for a formal currency union.
People need to know that is not going to happen.
People can see through scaremongering when they hear it. And an example of that, of course, is the bluff and bluster of people like Ed Balls and George Osborne on sterling.
So if there's another vote, the SNP Growth Commission recommends an independent Scotland keeps using the pound and sticks with the rules of the Bank of England anyway, without a formal agreement. And that way, they say, the UK government wouldn't have a veto. Using the pound would be a bridging position for at least 10 years before an independent Scotland might adopt a separate currency. But the report says that should only happen if 6 tests are met, including the new state successfully managing public finances, establishing a credible central bank, and winning public and business support for a new currency. Before then, we'd keep using the pound informally, but that's not uncontroversial.
I think you can anticipate that within the yes camp there will be those who are saying this isn't independence, this isn't independent enough, and meanwhile of course there'll be those on the other side saying, well look, actually no country at least as big as Scotland has ever gone down this track of using somebody else's currency, and that therefore this is a very untried and untested proposition.
A proposition that's yet to become SNP policy before being put to the public in a future referendum that still seems some way distant. Glenn Campbell reporting, Scotland, Gourock.
Our business and economy editor Douglas Fraser is with me now. I mean, we were reminded in Glenn's report just how central the economy has been to the debate about independence in Scotland. To what extent does this report move the argument on?
Well, it clearly moves. It's 4 years. It's clearly moving things on from 4 years ago, after very little had changed in terms of the arguments we've been hearing. It's candid, more so than in 2014, about the costs and the risks, particularly of the transition to independence, and also the compromises longer term. You're hearing there about currency, Scotland having no influence, let alone control over interest rates and financial management, and also having to cut back the deficit with some really tough constraints being recommended here on spending for at least 10 years. Now, it tries to avoid the easy answers, which we sometimes hear, admits that economic growth is not going to take off. It's not on its own the answer. Immigration is vital. That's far from popular with some people. It puts future oil revenues to one side rather than using them to close the gap on the deficit. It points to the need to make much clearer choices between priorities rather than just adding up all the demands. Now, in both economic and political terms, it's about reassurance, it's about building credibility, and in the context of the Brexit process, the reassurance and the credibility of Scotland within the UK is facing a fairly threatening time.
Thanks very much, Douglas Fraser. Back now for a quick word to our political editor, Brian Taylor at Holyrood. Is this throwing down a gauntlet, Brian, to the SNP's opponents?
Sally, it's about policy, of course. It's about policy on independence and concomitant matters like the currency, but it's also about strategy. Nicola Sturgeon is trying, first of all, to enthuse her own activists, to give them something to evangelise, to allow those activists, if you like, to be active rather than fretting and festering, but she's also trying to entice her opponents, her rivals, onto her own territory, to talk about the details of independence back and forward, to talk about the why of independence rather than the how and the when. As to the question of when, the report is deliberately silent on the subject of timing, and Nicola Sturgeon herself would say no more than she will make up her mind as to whether to hold an independence referendum once Brexit is perhaps clearer. On that very same point, Ruth Davidson was asked would she give advice to the Prime Minister on to whether to permit that referendum to take place. She said that advice hadn't changed. She would still say the Prime Minister should say no.
Brian, thank you very much. Police are hunting for the driver of a stolen car who caused an accident in which a motorist died after his vehicle caught fire. It happened in the early hours of this morning on the Maybury Road in Edinburgh. The victim was at the wheel of a Peugeot. It was struck by another car that had swerved to avoid the stolen Audi, which was on the wrong side of the road. Aileen Clark reports.
The aftermath of a crash which killed one man and has left a family being treated in hospital and deeply shocked. Around midnight, a grey Audi A3 was speeding along Maybury Road towards East Craigs roundabout. It pulled over onto chevrons to overtake a line of cars, but then headed into oncoming traffic, bearing towards a BMW. The BMW swerved to avoid the Audi, but then collided with a Peugeot. The Peugeot then burst into flames and the driver died. The man and woman in the BMW, both in their 20s, and their 5-year-old child, were taken to Edinburgh Royal Infirmary. Their injuries are not life-threatening, but police say this was a horrifying crash brought about by the reckless actions of the Audi driver.
This is a horrendous collision. Two families, a massive impact on two families, and not to mention the traumatic effect on all the witnesses and people that were involved in the accident. All I can urge is that anybody in Edinburgh that has any information that can help us find who was driving that Audi A3 at that time gets in touch with us and lets us know what they know.
Police say that after the crash, the driver of the Audi A3 stopped momentarily and looked at what had happened, but he didn't call the emergency services and he didn't try and help. He just drove off at speed. The Audi A3 was found abandoned in Cowdenbeath just a few hours later. It was stolen from Liberton in Edinburgh last month. The investigation is focused on tracing who was driving that car and any passengers, and those in a silver hatchback which was seen travelling in convoy with the Audi earlier and which was also then driven to Fife. Police believe other drivers may well have noticed the Audi late last night and early this morning because of the way it was being driven.
The indications are that the vehicle was driven in a reckless and dangerous manner, and we'd certainly appeal for anyone who may have witnessed the manner of driving or seen that vehicle on the road to get in touch with police.
Police are examining the Audi and they are dedicating a significant number of officers to trace its driver, who callously left the scene of this fatal crash. Aileen Clark, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
The brother of a young woman whose body was found in rural Perthshire has been charged with her murder. 24-year-old Jordan Johnson is alleged to have repeatedly stabbed his sister Annalise in the neck. It's alleged the killing took place at a monument near the village of Dunning earlier this month. Mr. Johnson made no plea at Perth Sheriff Court and was remanded in custody. A new law designed to protect our personal data has come into force today. Organisations across Scotland, regardless of their size, will have to comply or face a fine that could run into millions of pounds. So how have businesses been coping? And will the new regulation ensure that our data doesn't fall into the wrong hands? Andrew Anderson reports.
Every day, every hour, we share our data with companies, corporations and other organisations around the world. That data is valuable and sometimes vulnerable. So now companies are emailing you, asking if they can keep your information. That's because if companies or corporations or the smallest of businesses now misuse your data, they face a fine that's increased from £500,000 to potentially £17.5 million. It's the General Data Protection Regulation, and organisations of every size have to comply with it, including this one-man business. Daunting at first, but there's been help.
It's an awful lot of information, and thought how on earth are we going to comply with this?
but that's, I think, where having these events coming in, folk were talking to you and putting it into you in simple language.
Last year's cyber attack on the NHS affected 11 Scottish health boards. It showed the need for organisations to keep their guard up. So the new regulation requires organisations to review their systems, focus on technical security and ensure their staff are reliable. It's been a lot of work, particularly for Scotland's smaller businesses.
Well, I think it's been quite a significant challenge, but there has been a long time to get ready. It's not that we haven't known this was coming for a good, couple of years, but I think that it's only been recently. Certainly, the hype has grown since January as people have really worked towards a deadline.
But does it mean we can feel our personal data is better protected now? This lawyer believes so.
Another key change is increased rights for individuals. They're really trying to give individuals much more power and much more visibility over how organisations use their data, who they're sharing it with.
So it's day one of the new law. It's complex and even the regulator accepts it will take time to bed in. The advice to business? Don't panic. Andrew Anderson, Reporting Scotland.
You're watching BBC Reporting Scotland. It's 7:15. A reminder of tonight's top story. The SNP set out a new economic blueprint for independence, including plans to keep the pound for at least 10 years. And still to come, the St Mirren manager, Jack Ross, has joined Sunderland on a 2-year contract. Doctors are urging people to take extra care in the sun as parts of Scotland prepare for a warm bank holiday weekend. Temperatures in the west are expected to rise to a blistering 24 Celsius on Monday. Katie Hunter reports.
The sun's out and school's out, so it's time for a splash about. South Beach at Troon was busier than usual this afternoon, with hundreds of people making the most of the warm weather.
I've been playing football, having a picnic, playing tennis, all sorts.
Nice to see the beach very busy. Now everybody's out down enjoying themselves. It's really good.
I think we're due some nice sunny weather after such the rubbish weather that we've had recently, so yeah, it's lovely just to get down to the beach, isn't it?
But for Troon lifeboat crew, a sunny bank holiday weekend can mean a busy bank holiday weekend.
Just because it looks lovely, sometimes the wind direction can blow folk on lilos and rubber rings and stuff, they can blow them offshore. They're very, very good fun on the beach, but they can also be very dangerous, especially as I said a minute ago with the wind direction and the tides. Before you know it, you're suddenly half a mile to a mile out from the shore.
An hour after we filmed this, the crew were called to reports of inflatables floating off the coast. It was a false alarm. Elsewhere, Glasgow University women's rowing team squeezed in some last-minute training on the River Clyde ahead of this weekend's Scottish boat race. While in Aberdeen, the weather wasn't quite warm enough to tempt people into the North Sea. But even when it feels cooler, doctors say there are still risks.
We think in Scotland we can't get sunburnt, it's not like being in Spain, but you can when the sun is as strong as this. So stay out direct sun in the hottest times of the day, particularly for children, and use suntan cream. You need to use protection.
Back in Troon, most people were taking heed of that advice while enjoying the sunshine.
We've been playing in the water and building sandcastles.
After this, I'm going outside to play football with my friends, ride my bike.
We're probably just going to go in the sea again and play with the inflatables.
Describe what's it like in the water?
Freezing.
Freezing but fun for these children. And there's plenty more sunshine to come. Katie Hunter, Reporting Scotland, Troon.
Football, and the St Mirren manager Jack Ross has joined Sunderland on a 2-year contract. 41-year-old Ross was named the PFA Scotland Manager of the Year after guiding St Mirren to the Championship title and promotion to the Premiership. The Saints will now have to begin the hunt for a new manager before the start of the season. Martin Dowden reports.
Ross, of course, saved St Mirren from relegation in his first season. He then last season took them all the way from there to the top of the Championship, gaining promotion to the Scottish Premiership. That, of course, attracted the interest of Sunderland, a club ailing now in English League One after relegations himself. It's a massive opportunity for Ross at a very big club, but a support there who maybe expected a better known name.
I think one of the things that was in Jack's favour, you know, he was kind of courted with Barnsley, most recently Ipswich, and obviously the Manager of the Year and the PFA Awards is obviously going to give him that prestige.
So a big challenge for Jack Ross at Sunderland, but also a big challenge for St Mirren to find the right man to take them forward. Early contenders emerging already: the former Hearts manager Robbie Neilson, the former Ross County manager Jim McIntyre, and the former captain of this club, Jim Goodwin. It'll be interesting to see who they go for to take them forward after Jack Ross's departure.
Game of Thrones stars Rose Leslie and Kit Harington are to marry in the northeast of Scotland next month. The couple met on the fantasy show in 2012, where they played on-screen lovers Jon Snow and Ygritte. Their engagement was announced in September last year. A date of June the 23rd has been posted at the Huntly Registration Office in Aberdeenshire. The actress's father, Councillor Seb Leslie, owns a castle in his West Garrier constituency. A walrus that's been appearing on Scottish beaches since March has appeared at Wick in Caithness. The Arctic walrus first appeared in Orkney before turning up in the Highlands and also in the Western Isles. Earlier this week, a senior advisor to Worldwide Fund for Nature on the Arctic said it was really rare for a walrus to show up outside the Arctic. He said earlier images of the animal appeared to show that it was healthy. Well, as we've been hearing, there's a sunny weekend ahead and it coincides with the BBC's biggest weekend, a festival of music being held in 4 locations across the UK. In Scotland, it's at Scone Palace in Perth, and our arts correspondent Pauline McLean is there. Pauline.
Well, this is the biggest music event that the BBC has ever undertaken. As you say, 4 locations, 4 sites like this in 4 nations. And the idea really, I think we definitely got the best of them here. We definitely got the best of the weather as well. But the idea is that it's all the music, all the musicians, all the programmes that you see and hear across the BBC brought to these stages. So this afternoon alone, we've heard traditional music, we've heard classical music, we've heard pop music, and we've heard jazz. They've never heard their school piano played like this. Jamie Cullum taking his music off stage and into the assembly hall at this Perth primary school. They're open to all sorts of music here, making it the perfect warm-up for this new festival.
It's an amazing breadth of music that Biggest Weekend is putting on. You know, you really can see anything to your taste and hopefully explore things that are outside your taste as well. So that's always what I love about being at festivals, so that you tend to see music that maybe you wouldn't normally see. And the Biggest Weekend, you know, I'm playing there this afternoon in Perth, and then I'm off to Coventry on Sunday, and the whole weekend, I mean, yeah, I'm going to see a lot of music and I can't wait.
No dark despair around.
And you'll certainly see and hear a lot of music in the grounds of Scone Palace over the weekend. This just one of 4 sites where all the musicians you normally hear and see on the BBC are performing live. From folk music to jazz, classical to pop. Dame Evelyn Glennie is no stranger to musical crossover, and she says events like these are vital.
I think this is what's also special about this. Music is music, you know, and it connects with people, even if the spoken word can sometimes be a barrier. There's always that sense of sound that can connect us, and that resonance, really. And so there's something for everybody here. And even if you think, oh, I don't like classical, or I don't like folk, or I don't like jazz, when you see it in this setting and you see the musicians live playing, it just changes your mind. It really does.
From jazz on a summer's afternoon to pop in the grounds of a palace, this newest of festivals seems to have won over a whole new audience. And that's the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra getting ready now for their performance with Dame Evelyn Glennie. This evening they'll be on in about half an hour's time. Tomorrow we're expecting about 20,000 people down here. It is completely sold out for Noel Gallagher and his Flying Birds, for Simple Minds, for Emily Sandé. So it's going to be a really busy day. We are being warned that the traffic round the area might well be a bit of an issue. And the other unusual warning for this time of year is please bring plenty of sunscreen.
Thanks very much, Pauline. Yes, we do get rather carried away by anything over 20, don't we, Chris? But it's going to be lovely.
Yes, for most, not all, but for most of us. For most of us. Let's take a look at the detail. Thank you, Sally. Hello there. It's been a lovely day for most of us today. Blue sky, sunshine, feeling warm. And certainly through the next few hours, for most of us staying that way, but you'll see cloudier skies in the south, some showery outbreaks of rain here, but those tending to clear away, and this low cloud just lapping on shore around northern coasts and through the Northern Isles. But most of us having a dry night, temperatures around about 8 to 12 Celsius. So to the weekend, and here's Saturday's pressure pattern. You can see high pressure up towards Scandinavia, weather fronts to the south of us, but we're sitting pretty. A few showers, perhaps in the south initially, those quickly go, and then it's a dry and fine day, plenty of sunshine, but you'll notice this low cloud still with us around some northern coasts, and it could well be fairly stubborn to clear. So a bit of a fly in the ointment there, but for most of us, dry, sunny and warm. Temperatures easily into the low 20s, particularly across west central Scotland. And even towards the east coast, we're looking at high teens, perhaps 20 Celsius, so much better than recent days. But you can see that low cloud around parts of the northeast of Aberdeenshire, in towards the Moray Firth, up through Caithness and Orkney. Where it laps on shore, it will be quite cool, quite grey. Shetland, though, in the sunshine. And if you're hill walking or climbing, plenty of sunshine across the ranges. There will be a little bit of low cloud in the glens at first, but that will quickly burn back. And quite windy actually on the summits coming in from the east. You can see the wind speeds there, and quite warm too. Temperatures in the teens on the summits. Of course, high UV, a risk of sunburn. And as we were seeing there just a moment ago at Scone Palace, plenty of sunshine in the forecast throughout the day tomorrow, temperatures into the low 20s. Rest of the afternoon into the evening, lovely evening sunshine. That low cloud still with us across the northeast for a time too. That takes us to Sunday. High pressure still with us, still pretty rubbish down south, what a shame. But for us, plenty of sunshine and warm sunshine at that too, with warm air coming up from the near continent. So if anything, Sunday warmer than Saturday. Bit of low cloud start the day through the central belt and up towards the Moray Firth. That will quickly burn back. And then a fine afternoon with plenty of sunshine in store. Temperatures by mid-afternoon easily around 23 degrees, but look at these orange colours towards the Ayrshire coast. We could see 25 on Sunday, so really very warm indeed. And of course, UV levels remain high. Bank holiday Monday, low 20s possible, maybe 24 in places. A bit more cloud around, a few showers in the south, but the central lowlands northwards, dry and fine with some sunshine. That's the forecast for now.
Thanks very much, Chris. And that is Reporting Scotland. I'll be back with a late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. But until then, from everyone on the team, have a good evening. Bye-bye.